Ladies and gentlemen, let us now continue to the first keynote lecture entitled Comics in Teaching Mathematics, a Design Experiment.
Our first keynote speaker is Professor Toh Tin Lam from National Institute of Education, Singapore, whose presentation will be chaired by Bapak Paulus Kuswandono, PhD. Please give a warm welcome to both of them.
The distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This morning I'm very happy to welcome you here to the seminar room. The first keynote speaker would be from Professor Toh Tin Lam from National Institute of Education, Nanyang, Technology University, Singapore. As we are already aware that teaching mathematics is probably the most challenging job ever. We understand that students actually sometimes they do not like mathematics because mathematics is actually very difficult to learn. But today we are very happy because we are going to learn from Professor Toh Tin Lam how to design materials using comics to teach mathematics. And we would like to learn also how the phases to design this, particularly for the lower progress students. And then he also did the research in Singapore. As you probably can see from his CV in the internet, he has already written quite a number of research projects, book chapters, and also journal articles. So, Professor Toh Tin Lam, the time is yours. Yeah. So, could you please come? Yeah, okay. So, if you wish to learn more about his abstract, it is actually written on page 44. So, the title of his presentation is Comics in Teaching Mathematics, a Design Experiment. While he is presenting, I would like to also expect your active participation. I hope that this presentation can also inspire us with your own fields of subject matter, maybe in some other subjects, for example, like biology and some other stuff. Hopefully, we can also learn from him how to design comics to teach a particular subject. The time is yours, Professor.
Thank you. Pardon me, when I stepped down to Indonesia yesterday, I think something wrong with my throat. So if my voice is not clear, please accept my apologies. I will try to talk a bit slowly. So if at any point in time you need me to stop, you raise your hand at the back, I will know how to react. Okay. So the first, really thank to have this opportunity to share with you one of the research projects that I've done in Singapore with a particular purpose in mind, and is not under the mainstream agenda of the Singapore Ministry of Education, but of course we want to help the low progress learners in learning mathematics. Briefly, this will be the outline of my talk. Basically, the whole idea is about comics in teaching mathematics. I presented this in 2 other conferences, but now we are almost at the end of the first phase, so we have a little bit more things to share with you. For those of you who are familiar with the Singapore mathematics education, you might have read in many places that Singapore has done very well in TIMSS and PISA. Read out all these results. But There are some other points I want to present to you from another angle. It is not all beds of roses, everything so smooth. We also have a very significant tail end in the performance in mathematics and science. We still have a quite a significant bit of students who did not do well in the mathematics and science. So this is actually our concern. Of course, you can say that the whole average is very high in terms of the performance, but our tail end is very significant. So this is one of the reasons why at a particular point in time in 2014, I proposed this research project of using comics to help the low progress learners in mathematics. We call this low progress learners in my talk. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I'm just using a term to describe. They are performing in the lowest 25%, and this tail end is fairly long. And actually many researchers in Singapore are aware of this situation. The Ministry of Education is very concerned. What can we do to help these low progress learners? I'm from the Singapore National Institute of Education, NIE. Among the whole group of researchers, we also put in effort. We want to see what can be done to help our low progress learners in mathematics. The Ministry of Education, the senior teachers in Ministry of Education, the specialists, the researchers from the National Institute of Education, everybody is thinking of what are the things we can do to help these low progress learners. You see, if you read through what we have done in Singapore, there are many approaches. We have done a lot of things to help all these low progress learners. Classroom management. Sometimes, if you do not have good classroom management, you cannot even manage the class, so the students don't even learn. So one way to tackle the problem of low progress learners is to improve on the classroom management. Education psychology, how to motivate the students, make the lesson more exciting. General pedagogy. In mathematics, we talk about, in the general education, talk about cooperative learning strategies. Learning should not be coming from the teachers alone, but also among the students. As they cooperate, there's a lot of things that they learn from one another. And of course, specifically to mathematics, there are many ways to help students learn. For example, algebra is so abstract. How do we make our students learn algebra at a younger age? So we have concrete pictorial abstract approach, what we call the CPL approach. We have actually used all these strategies. All these are not new in Singapore. In fact, any pre-service teachers have learned all these things. And the Ministry of Education have been actually engaging teachers in all this professional development. And yet, we still have a long tail end of this low progress learner. So that's why it is the concern of the Ministry of Education. What else can we do? Maybe we modify the way of teachers' professional development or whatever. So at that point in time, I was thinking, perhaps, is it possible to look at education from another perspective? We have used the education theory. Perhaps, is it possible to look at education from communication perspective? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this. If you go through communication theory, meaning mass communication theory, you examine the whole process of communication. You have a sender, you have a receiver. A sender wants to send a particular message across to the receiver. If you can see it there. Okay. A sender wants to send a message to the receiver, Before you can send a message, you will need to code it, encode it, and when you reach the receiver, before they can understand the message, they decode it. You see? So this is a very interesting model. And in the process of this message transmission, you go through the whole channel, and in this channel there's usually what we call the noise. Sorry, the word there is noise. Noise are all the interference to the message that's being transmitted. And you can see the two circles overlaps. Those represent the sender's field of experience versus the receiver's field of experience. There should be some overlap. And this overlap should be as big as possible. Actually, at the time, when I tried to look at this communication model, I felt that there is a lot of similarity in education, but unfortunately it is not explored. And the person who actually explored this communication theory are actually the commercial companies, like McDonald's, KFCs. No, not so much of KFC, McDonald's. They actually use this communication theory to get receivers to buy in to the new product. And they have the whole theory of communication. And what I was thinking at the point in time is, are we able to use some of this model of communication in education to bring across a different perspective of looking at education? Some of the key thing of this communication theory, there are many communication theories. A few of the communication theory, generally there are something in common. One thing is, before you communicate from a receiver to a sender, you have to establish the common grounds between sender and receiver. Establishing the common grounds is very important. An example, if you are dealing with a low progress learner, somebody who is so weak in mathematics, you get a mathematics professor to teach the mathematics to the students, to this low progress learner. They couldn't see any common grounds between the two persons. The low progress learners, usually they have very low self-esteem. They say that this is a professor. I am a much lower level than the professor. I will never be able to understand. There's no common grounds. So it's very hard for them to buy in, for example. So that's why under communication theory, the first thing is to establish some commonalities between the sender and receiver. That's why you can see that in the commercial company, when they want to endorse a certain products, they get somebody who is able to reach out to the general public. They get some celebrities, for example, to endorse a product. This is an example of establishing common grounds. Another thing about communication theory that's interesting is, you want to get a message across, you have to reduce the noise in the process of communication. This noise actually disrupts the whole process of knowledge, message transmission in the encoding and the decoding phase. For example, when you want to bring across a message that a certain product is good, you use an advertisement or whatever, but they actually showcase some other things that actually cause the receiver to be repelled. So that's why these commercial companies, when they come up with these advertisements, they are very careful that there's no noise elements involved. I have read one whole book on this, how McDonald's and some of these companies make use of communication theory to reach out to the general public. That is very interesting. Also, under communication theory, just to get the message across to the receiver is not considered as successful communication. You go and take a look at the different models of communication. Successful communication is only when the receiver, only when the receiver starts to buy in the idea. How? What you're telling me is interesting. It's not, I understand what you're talking about. I am excited over your idea. I want to try something out. For example, you show me your new product. I'm so excited. So it gets stuck in my mind. I will try to go and buy it if it's possible. So in communication theory, you must reach this stage when you get the receiver to buy it. Then that is considered as a full successful communication. I read through this. I was so excited over this, whether some of this can be applied to education and how some of these commercial companies actually make use of this model to sell their products to the general public. Are we able to build on some of these things? Of course, there are many different communication models, but basically, these are some things that's common across the different models. Then the next thing that I got excited was at the time, that was 2014 and even earlier, I was a textbook writer in Singapore also, and I used a few comic strips in the textbooks. And I heard from my friends in the schools that the kids were so excited, not over the mathematics, they don't like the math, but they like to read the comics. Every chapter, one set of comic strips. Many of my friends in the school who are the teachers, they tell me they will finish reading all the comics. They don't like the maths, they will skip the mathematics. Very interesting. Working with the low progress learners, when they get excited with the comics, they get the textbook, they will just read through the comics. They do not want the mathematics. So that was the time when I thought, why not teach the whole chapter of mathematics through comics instead of having one comic strip here and there? Okay? But generally, we see that comics are appealing to the students. Students generally get very excited with comics. In the old days, teachers hate comics. And they see this as an enemy in the school. I'm not sure whether you have this experience in Indonesia. In Singapore, as a student, I have this. When I was a student, I brought some comics books to school, discovered by the teachers, and the teachers were so angry, they tore away my comics books in front of the public. I'm not sure whether you had this experience when you were students, but definitely it is true in Singapore, not just from the research literature. But actually quite interesting, I think since the 1990s, there have been some educators who have started to tap on the use of comics in teaching mathematics. So at the time I was flipping through some education literature, I realized that some people have been doing that, but perhaps not so much from maths education. Chemistry education definitely, science education yes, but mathematics education minimum. That is something that I thought is very interesting. Okay, let us come to a common definition of what is meant by comics. Comics is any medium that conveys messages through the use of visual images. They use cartoons, usually visual images in the form of cartoons, to convey the messages across. And what is the most impressive of comics is that as you use comics, you can create a lot of laughter. You add a lot of humor into the comics. And research has actually shown that when you include humors in the comics, when you include humors in the message you transmit to the students, there is an increased information retention. There's a very old classical research done by Kaplan, I think it's the 70s, that shows that using humors in education actually increases students' information retention. There is such a research. And comics as a vehicle has this potential. You can include humor. Usually comics involve humor. And also, the use of comics is also interesting in that sometimes it can give a student a wild imagination. For example, if you are talking about the real world, if I tell you a man is 30 meters tall, something is wrong, right? The tallest man maybe 2-point-something meter, perhaps. Okay? But in the world of imagination, if you talk about comics, you allow the students to go, wow, this man is 30 meters tall. Wow, so he or she will imagine this person is as high as a 10-story building. You see, in the case of a giant. So you can imagine, you can allow students the room of imagination. So this actually goes slightly beyond the border of the real world. Okay? And of course, the key thing of us in maths education is that we want students to have a sense of estimation. It is not that we must insist everything must conform to the real world, but when a person says that, when a student says that this is 30 meters, they must have an idea how big is 30 meters. For example, in Singapore, I share with you, we have one examination question which stuck many students. We have a coin. In Singapore, we have a coin. We have a 50-cent coin. There was one exam question that many students were stuck. I give you a 50-cent coin. Roughly, what is the weight? Not in the textbook. Is it 6 grams? 60 grams? 600 grams? Or 6 kilograms? This is a multiple choice question in the Singapore examination. Many students were stuck and many parents were complaining. It's not, because what is important in mathematics is not about just calculation. You must also have a sense of estimation. 6 grams is as light as a feather. 600 grams is pretty heavy. You see? So, what should be the most appropriate math? You see, in mathematics, we also want students to have some sense of estimation. And when we use comics, we also build in students the ability. We want them to discuss an estimation. I saw there's one comics book from one of the Japanese bookstore. They talk about some fictitious character. You have a giant as tall as the Mount Fuji. Okay, so how high do you think this giant is? That is very interesting. I saw this in a Japanese bookstore. You see, they want students to have a sense of estimation as well. Okay, in the world of imagination. So comics has this ability. You go beyond the real world. You create some laughter, some room for students' imagination. So it is quite interesting that what comics can potentially do. I included this. I think there should be some mathematicians here. I share with you, I use these 2 comics in my textbook. One mathematician came to me. He was very upset. You take a look at this set of comics here. I want to introduce the concept of similarity. This mathematician came to me and told me, mathematically this is wrong. You take a look. But the students were so happy about it. That's so funny. You see, this is such a silly thing, right? Yeah. But because of this, they have a sense of similarity. What is wrong with this? You see, when I talk about similarity, right? An object is in 3 dimensions, right? But when I draw everything on a 2-dimension paper, it is wrong. How you cannot talk even similarity? Agree, no? Yeah. One is a 2-dimension stuff and the real object is a 3-dimension. How can you talk about similarity? So something is wrong there. But what I thought is, I was looking at the audience. This is a group of low progress learners who do not want to even talk about mathematics. The concept of similarity is too difficult to bring across directly. So many of them, what they see is when they see this, they start to see that, oh, there is a sense of same shape, you see. So when they start to talk about the same shape, I thought that we have won the battle. But of course, mathematically, there is something wrong here, of course. But we want to capture the students' attention. So when I work with the high progress learners, I would not have used this. That's for sure. And of course, the other one is an exaggeration. This is a bird hunter. He thought that the bullet would travel in a straight line, but actually it is a parabolic path. Okay, but of course, you can see that nobody in the real world will such thing will not happen in the real world. So in the world of the comics, many funny things can happen, and all these things hopefully can convey some mathematical ideas involved. And another thing that I always like to share is this. This is another silly joke that I use comics to bring across. It looks silly. You see, this person is always one more than the other person. 3 for $1, the other person is 4 for $1. Then 4 for $1, then he up to 5 for $1. This reflects the Singapore spirit, very competitive. Sorry. Okay. Finally, he doesn't want to disclose how many. He just say X. So the other person say this is X plus 1. You see, what I found was exciting was when I talked to the students about it. They start to see X plus 1 as something as 1 more than X. Usually they see X plus 1 as the sum of X and 1. They see this as a process of adding X and 1. But through the comics, I bring across another way of looking X plus 1 as 1 more than X, you see? So there are two ways of looking at X plus 1. It can be a process or it can be a concept. So using a casual way can bring across some other parts of mathematics not usually covered in the standard textbook approach. So, of course, in part of my research project is after going through this and having some preliminary response from the teachers, I would like to know whether can comics really be used in a mathematics classroom. And if it is possible, how can we design a teaching module or a teaching package that use comics as a method of instruction? Because bear in mind, right at the beginning, I told you that the young kids, especially the low progress learners, when they see mathematics, they want to skip the mathematics. Even the textbook of comics, they will read the comics and skip the mathematics. So are we able to design a module that uses all these comics in the entire teaching process itself? That we actually infuse the mathematics concepts inside. So this is part of the research project that I was engaged in since 2014. And of course, how to enact such a lesson using comics. As part of the research, we want to see what is the impact of the comics on students' learning. And also the motivation and academic self-concept. These are the different ways we want to look at the students' reaction. Do they perform better in exam questions, in all the mathematics achievement tests after that? How about their motivation? Are they more motivated to learn mathematics? How have their academic self-concept changed, if any, after going through such a design? And also we want to see in this enactment of this mathematics lesson using comics, what are the pedagogies that are associated with the use of the comics? So these are some things that we want to answer using our research. So in the methodology phase, we use something called design experiment. So what we have is, we begin with a theory. We believe that comics can be a viable mode of instruction for mathematics classroom if we actually use this communication theory. We use the help of communication theory to a certain extent, coupled with the usual pedagogical theory that we have been using. So we believe that this is visible, looking at so many references that we discussed. And we conceptualize this design. Our purpose is we want to improve students' learning. We hope that they perform better. They are more motivated to learn mathematics, and their academic self-concept actually increase. That's what we want to do. And after we have this design phase, we implement this in the real world. Our real world in this case is the authentic mathematics classroom. We go to the mathematics classroom, we actually implement this research, this design, and we want to see what is the student's response. And of course, one thing about design experiment that we are using is good, as in we can actually collect data using a variety of methods. So this is what we really tap on. When the teachers implement this design in the classroom, we want to see its efficacy from different angles. First of all, we want to see how teachers conduct the lesson. So we have a video recording. We see how teachers really conduct the lesson. What are the students' response? So we collect artifacts of students' work to analyze. What are the response? And we also interview the teachers and the students. What is the students' reaction to the comics? Do they just say, it's boring, it's waste of time? Or do they say, oh, I love it, I want more of it? We want to see the students' reaction. And through interview with the teachers, we also see the teachers' concern. Of course, one of the teachers' concern through the use of comics is that a few of the teachers complain that because of this, they actually need to spend a little bit more time. Originally, they take about 2 weeks, to complete. With the use of comics, they may take about 1 more lesson. So this is one of the teachers' concern. Okay? And of course, after taking into all these observations into consideration, we sit down, we discuss with the teachers how to refine this package so that it will become more suitable for them to be used. So this is what we call refinement and accommodation based on the findings. These findings, like what I mentioned, include a lot of things: seeing students work, interview with teachers and students based on the classroom observations. Based on all these things, we actually refine a package. Eventually, this teaching package is meant for the teachers to use, not just meant for us to collect data. So this is our whole cycle in carrying out this research. Okay, we begin with the theory. We look at communication theory. Like what I showed you earlier, communication theory seems to actually give us a head start on what are the things we need to do when we design this comics teaching package. We use this communication theory, a more fine-grained detail of the various communication theory in our design process itself. Design conceptualization. So what we do is that we design a comics teaching package as what we call a replacement unit. Let me clarify this term. Because this is part of my research, I want to study what is the impact of comics on student learning. So I would want minimum interference from the traditional resource. So those research schools that work with us, we tell them, when you participate in this research with us, for these topics, you don't use your classical textbooks to teach. For these few topics, you use our comics teaching package. So that's why our comics teaching package that we design is what we call a replacement unit, to replace the usual teaching resources that the teachers have been using in the school. And like what I would want to mention, when we develop this replacement unit, because it is a replacement unit, replace the usual textbooks, it must be complete with all the practice questions. It must complete with all the activities that the students would have actually used in the usual teaching approach. So this replacement unit, this comics teaching package is complete. In other words, it can replace the whole textbook for those chapters that they use on the comics. That was what? That was the meaning of the word replacement unit, to replace the original textbook. Because we want to study the impact. And these comics will cover all the concepts. That means after you finish reading through all the comics, all the concepts would have been covered. Of course, the way that we cover is very different from the textbook. That's for sure. It's very different. But they will still cover. They will still go through all the concepts within the comics itself. And appropriate juncture, there are all the practice questions associated with it. So this is the point that I'm trying to say. A replacement unit, complete in itself. The reason is because I want to study the impact of these comics on the students' learning. And comics is not just used as an enrichment. It's used as the actual teaching package itself. And when we develop this comics package, we use some general guiding principles from communication theory. Let me just share with you. Okay, this is in a Singapore context. So for this one whole chapter called percentage in the lower secondary topic, percentage is one big chapter in our lower secondary syllabus. So for this chapter, what we do is instead of using the standard textbook, we design the entire set of comics. So two things to take note. The context of the comics must be something that is exciting to the students. First of all, we chose the context. The context of the comics must be something that is exciting to the students. In Singapore, every year, we have something called the Great Singapore Sales. Every year, around June or July. We have something called the Great Singapore Sales. It's to attract the tourists to Singapore. So we use the context of Great Singapore Sales. These two persons, Sam and Sarah, what is their relation? Are they brother, sister, boyfriend or girlfriend, or what? I don't know. Leave it open. That's the whole idea. Leave it open. Okay? They will go through a series of journey. They have a very strange and funny encounter. And interestingly, every station that they go through, they encounter something with the concept of percentage. After they finish their 7 or 8 journey, all the different concepts of percentage is being covered. The reader has already gone through all those concepts of percentage required in the syllabus. And we choose 2 characters, one Sam, one Sarah. These are the 2 main characters that run through the whole story. But of course, there are many other subsidiary characters who will come in. But each of these characters represents a cognitive attribute. Sam, the boy, represents somebody who is very observant in the real world, but who knows nothing about mathematics. Okay? As he goes through all the shopping trip, he saw many exciting things. He is not good in maths, many things he can't explain. And Sarah is somebody who is good in mathematics, who will do the explanation for him. And through this explanation, all the mathematical concepts are being brought up for discussion. And the students also learn all the mathematics concept through all these comics. So when we design, what we do is we choose a context that is suitable for the students, likely to attract their attention. And at the same time, we use two characters. Each character will represent a certain attribute. And we do not want to use too long a story. Because teachers in schools are very concerned in our work with them. They want every lesson to have a good closure. They do not want to have a story that actually goes on for 10 lessons. Just like all your series, all the Korean series or whatever, so many episodes. They do not want that. They want every lesson to have one proper closure. Okay, so as a result, we have several short stories instead. But the characters are the same. The context is the same. It's about a shopping trip, but they go to different places within the shopping trip, and they have a lot of strange encounters. And actually, not only that, we also try to infuse some of the very common jokes, mathematics jokes in the comics itself. I share with you one of the jokes. If you go through the internet, there is this joke on percentage. You might have seen it. Huh? This person for a haircut, go to a barber, and this barber offers 50% discount. Okay? After the haircut, after this person came out from the barber shop, he realized that only half the hair is cut. So this is called 50% discount. Is this correct? You see, this is a joke, of course. It doesn't make sense in the real world. Huh? So, as we design these comics, we actually infuse a lot of these jokes in the context of this Sam and Sarah. And I could see that these jokes capture the students' attention because subsequently in our interview, okay, let me jump the sequence a little bit. When we interview the students talk about this character, this stupid character, getting deceived by this barbershop. And so this is not really 50% discount, right? Discount means you get more. Right, 50% is reduced in price and you only get 50% of the service done. This is not discount, right? Okay, so the students start to discuss all these things. That is very interesting. So we see that actually these jokes and humors really capture the students' attention. And as they talk about all these things, the mathematics concept are actually being attached in their mind. And what was interesting is subsequently we have another similar joke, but which is about 30% discount as 40% discount as 2/3. You see how it converts to fraction. We use this as a context. 2/5. We use this as a context to talk about conversion between fraction and decimal. And the students are receptive subsequently. That is very interesting that we saw. And not only that, this package is a replacement unit as it comes with all the variety of practice questions. We have a lot of contexts, practice questions under different contexts. Okay, this one is within the context of Sam and Sarah. Then subsequently we move to other contexts and eventually we move to the typical exam questions. So in the design of this teaching package itself, we also spend a lot of time thinking of the practice questions and of course the activities as well. The reason because we want our teachers to use this as a replacement unit. We want to study the impact, the efficacy of comics on the student learning. Now, you see, the whole difference between a research and a non-research is this. We want the teachers to enact this comics lesson. So we as the researchers, we not only develop the comics package, but we must tell our teachers, we must discuss with the teachers. As the researchers, we discuss with the teachers how you are going to carry out the lesson. Why we propose the lesson to be carried out in this way? Because this is not a traditional textbook approach. This is a comics. As the researchers, we sit down and explain to the teachers our rationale. We want them to buy in, to get our ideas, okay, and so that when they enact the lesson, they know exactly what we want. So we give them a set of proposed lesson outline. And we suggest to them Whenever possible, try to stick on. Try to follow our lesson outline as far as possible. Of course, if you have better idea, you are free to modify. So we give them something to begin with, which I think more or less they agree with the underlying principle for them to try out in the lesson. And of course, under comics lesson, we are suggesting this. The pedagogy that we propose is the storytelling pedagogy. That means what? Usually, in the usual mathematics classroom, a teacher will explain the mathematics concept very clearly for the students to understand. So in the comics lesson, when we go through the literature, we feel that it would be good if we can use what we call the storytelling approach. That means the teacher's job is not so much as to just focus on the mathematics without the context, but is to go along with the students, the story. Tell the story. See, today Sam and Sarah are in Great Singapore Sales in the Orchard Road in Singapore. So how many of you have been to this place, has been to that place, and start to get the students to engage as the teachers tell the story. As the teachers tell the story, they also bring out the mathematics concept. You see, this shop gives 50% discount. So do you know what 50% discount is? So you see, through discussing the context of the story, they bring out the mathematics concept. It is not that the teacher totally doesn't explain, but the teacher also actually engage the students in the storytelling. They tell the stories, they also get the students to participate, etc. Okay, there is a lot of literature on storytelling in education. For those of you who are interested, you can actually just Google for it, there's a lot. So that was what I mean. For example, this is a very interesting case. 20% discount versus 80% discount. You know that when you do calculations, this is the part that students are always confused. Huh? When you say a shop offers 20% discount, is that the same as 80% discount? If I say a shop offers 20% discount, how much do you need to pay? Is it? It's 80% of the money. So we use a very interesting fish spa story, okay, to bring this out. This is only part of it. To show that making a mistake in this, the consequence can be very drastic. Fish spa. The joke later on is that this boss of this spa has another 80% discount spa, which consists of piranhas. Okay, very funny stories there, which is quite stupid, but we just want to bring across the ideas. So what we did in our research is that we feel that this comics approach might be viable, but due to the limitation of resource, we are not able to carry out this comics package replacement unit for all the chapters in the lower secondary. To develop such a package is very expensive and at the same time needs a lot of resource. So what we did, we come to a compromise, which is of course not the best way, because we realize a certain result we can't see. Is that in the lower secondary topics, we select 5 main topics: percentage, statistics, probability, application of maths. We select these 5 topics, and in our research school, we say that for these 5 topics, you don't teach using your textbook, you use our comics package as a replacement unit. Okay, of course, I will explain to you from communication theory why this is not ideal later on. Just keep it a minute. And so the comics instructional package is implemented in the research schools through the teacher's lesson delivery. So we try out in the schools for these 5 topics in the school curriculum. The other topics, the teachers still use the traditional textbook approach. That's fine. And of course, like what I mentioned earlier, when we use this design experiment, a good thing is that we use a variety of methods to collect data. It's not repeated. We have quantitative and qualitative method. Quantitative, we have something which is the student's motivation and academic self-concept questionnaire. Qualitative, we have the teacher and student interview. We have the focus group discussion. and of course analysis of classroom episode. In fact, now we are moving on to this analysis of the classroom episode, which we saw many interesting things. So finally, I just want to say this. Step 5. We define and accommodate based on the observations and analysis. So roughly, this is the cycle. First, we come up with a comics teaching package. Then we implement it in school. When we implement it in the school, we face the constraints. Policy. What you mean by policy? I share with you. Because my comics package, I have hard copy and a soft copy. The hard copy comics is online. So actually what we were thinking was that we want students to use their mobile. Okay, we have this swipe comics. So that when the students, they read it, they can swipe and practice questions over there. But the school policy, some schools, is that they don't allow students to use the mobile in the classroom. You see, so we have to accommodate. So we use a hard copy for those schools. We have no choice. Yeah, in some other cases, is that the way that they ban the students is not according to the subject-based banding. They have a very strange way of banding. So as a result, we need to have different types of practice questions for different students. So you can see that we have the constraints we have to fill, which is the policy and the students' needs. Even though we talk about low progress learners, different schools that we went to, their definition of low progress learners could be different. Some of them, even though they call them low progress learners, but they are much stronger students. So they have different needs. We have to address to these different needs. And then we go back to the school practice, the community, and after that, we do the modification, and it goes in loops. And the current phase that I have that I can share with you compared to last year, now we have completed 3 cycles. Okay? Of course, the whole idea of our design is that if it doesn't work in the school, of course, you will just stop it. After doing one cycle, if you see that it is not suitable, we will just stop it. But so far, we are still carrying on. All the schools that we work with, we have gone to the 3rd cycle. Some of the feedbacks from the teachers is this. Students, especially the low progress learners, start to talk about mathematics in the class. Because previously, without the comics, the students are just creating troubles in the class. They are not doing mathematics. Teachers need to discipline them. But with these things, many of the teachers were so happy. They say that the students start to talk about mathematics in the class. So they find that a large part of the discipline problem has been removed. This is one thing that's quite encouraging. This was reported in the Singapore Space like a few years back. And not only that, what we saw in the lesson is this. This was something that actually goes beyond the researchers' my expectation. Instead of just purely using storytelling, many teachers engage students in role play. They feel that storytelling is good for the first 3 to 4 lessons, but if my whole chapter is going to be taught through storytelling, it can be very boring. So many teachers, they actually get students to role play. They make modifications to the comics, and the whole lesson becomes extremely interactive. So this is one of the modifications that we made. At first, I thought that storytelling is a good pedagogy for comics, but now I feel that storytelling should be combined with other things like role play and student engagement. So this is one of the main refinements that we make. Not only that, teachers feel that we should not give the students the full set of comics. Otherwise, like what I told you earlier, they will just finish reading the comics and forget about the maths. They feel that in the comics itself, there should be breaks as well, to let the students to complete the story, and even to create the story as well. So what you see on top was our original comics. What you see in the bottom was what was proposed by the teacher. So we feel that with all this adaptation, the students are able to participate even more in the mathematics lesson itself. And of course, some other findings that we find was that in Singapore, we are pushing this thing called the 21st century competency. So when I observe all the classroom episodes, I realized that very interestingly, many of the elements of 21st century skills are being reinforced in the class. Even though when we interview the teachers don't seem to know anything about it. But when we observe the lesson, we see that many of these 21st century competency skills are being reinforced. Most likely, subconsciously. The teachers may not even be aware of them. One other thing that I would like to share with you, even though my result is not conclusive, is that in one of our research, we have one student who is a dyslexic student, difficulties in reading. And this is the comment in the interview that he made with us. This is also unintended actually. Okay? This was unintended. He felt that with comics, there's not so much reading, and it's so interesting, he doesn't mind to read and read it and reread again. As a result, he gets so excited with mathematics. He knows mathematics is important, and now he gets excited. Unfortunately, for special needs, my study is not conclusive because this is only one case. Okay, more work needs to be done. Of course, we are faced with this problem. Even though now we are okay, I will be doing one more cycle of this data collection. I cannot conclude that there is a significant improvement in the students' academic self-concept and motivation. This is one thing I can't conclude. I can't conclude. Even though there is the delta is positive, there's a positive gain. But statistically, it is not significant. Statistically, it is not significant. So I refer to communication theory. Is this understandable? So there is a theory of mere exposure. From the communication studies, there's one theory of mere exposure, which actually says that things like motivation and academic self-concept, these are just like belief, right? Are something that is very permanent in us as a human beings. I want to change your belief, I want to change your attitude. I must keep you exposed to this information for a long period of time. You try to imagine when McDonald's, I think you have McDonald's in Indonesia, right? When McDonald's come out with a new product, they will keep on advertising for 6 months, right? For 3 months or 6 months in the TV. Every time you switch on the TV, you will keep on seeing this same advertisement again for 3 months. Then after that, they stop altogether. This one is from theory of mere exposure. You want a person to change attitude, you must keep on exposing for a period of time. And not too far beyond. Because if you keep on exposing for too far beyond, the person may start to feel bored. See? There's a negative attitude. So after a time, the advertisement will stop completely. You see, so we feel that I can use this to explain why we do not have this significant positive gain. It's because we only have 5 chapters spread over 2 years. Somehow in our interview, they can recall what they have done. But to have a change of attitude over such a short period of exposure is fairly difficult. Even though delta is positive, but unfortunately it is still not statistically significant. Okay, so we are trying to address this, maybe to follow up for a longer period of time. So this will be our next period. Next slide. Okay, so as what I mentioned earlier, these are some things that we learn in the refinement process. Pedagogy is not just storytelling, a lot more things. And also practice questions, because we are catering to many different types of students. The practice questions should be varied. And also, we should be more conscious in developing the 21st century competency into this package itself. Okay, so I guess this is the next step. We are going to scale up, and we are going to move to the primary schools as well, even though now we start with a lower secondary group. Okay, so we find that we are in the phase of a second or third iteration. Okay, we are in the third iteration, and we are quite confident that it will work for the low progress learner. The next thing we are going to move to will be for the upper primary students, especially those lower progress learners there. Okay, so I guess I will stop here. So sorry if I exceeded the time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you, Professor Dr. Lam, for your presentation. I think we are all inspired by the way we process our mind using comics, using our visualization and the like. So this time is actually for us to discuss and to ask questions, to critically think about what's going on. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3 first, and then the rest later. Okay. Could you please mention? This is the microphone, please. Could you please mention? Come. No. Come forward here. This one, this lady. 1, 2, 3 over there. Okay. Mention your name, please.
My name is Rahma Johar from Aceh.
Yeah.
I have joined your presentation 2 years ago in BME. BME 41.
Okay.
And at the time you gave me 2 print-out copy of your comics.
Yes, yeah. That was the very, very first version. There were some mistakes over there. Yes. So now we have refined. This is the 3rd version that I show. Yes.
Yeah, very good comments. I have 2 questions.
Yes, please.
The first one about technical problems and another one about the analysis of qualitative data. About the technical problem, I want to know who is a designer of your comics? Because after I joined your presentation at IBA at the time, I asked my student to design comic, but my student didn't have a sense of comic because they didn't know about the comic, so difficult for her to design the comics.
Okay.
And I suggest her to ask someone to help her, and I think they use a digital designer. How about you? The second question is about the qualitative data. You mentioned this year you go to the analysis of classroom episodes. So what is the framework do you use to analyze the classroom episodes?
Okay.
Please give me more explanation.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. Okay, the first question. You see, actually in my presentation itself, you see all these comics. To be very frank, I think my whole purpose is to engage the students in the learning process. I would not want my students to start to draw the comics. That itself can be a noise in the communication process. Because the whole message we want to get across to the students is the mathematics itself. It's the mathematics. And comics and all these things are to attract the students, to bring the students to focus, to help them to learn. So I would not want to spend too much time to get the students to draw the comics. So in this research project, basically it's a funded research project in which I get the funding from the Ministry of Education, and I get a graphic designer to design all these things. Not just a designer, but also another programmer. And it so happened that I managed to get one person who can do this designing and programming together. So in fact, what I showed you the hard copy, I have another online version. For those of you who are keen, you can send me an email. I can give you the link. There's an online version that is usable on the mobile app, and you can just swipe, and you can go to the practice question. That's the online version. Okay, so in this design process itself, I get a designer and a programmer. And all these things actually is quite expensive. So this is one of the reasons why I only do 5 topics out of so many topics in the lower secondary. Because it takes time and really a lot of money. Okay, so this is one of the main reasons. And of course, you mentioned about you get your students to design the comics. In fact, some of the teachers in Singapore actually told me about that. In fact, I thought that is a good idea. But at the same time, I cautioned them. The main thing that I'm teaching is mathematics. I'm not teaching them how to draw comics. You see, the main thing is mathematics. But in Singapore, there's one specialized school called the School of the Arts, called SOTA, a School of the Arts. According to the teachers whom I know, they say that there are some very talented students who are willing to draw comics for free, and they can draw very good comics as well. But the whole idea I told her is, the message is we want them to learn mathematics. Also, comics as student creation is one thing that I'm exploring now. That means after I show you one comics, suppose this is my student, after I show my student the comics, then I want the student to extend the story further. Okay, can you continue the story with your comics? You see, so this one we have moved from problem solving to problem posing. You see, that means the students will pose their own problems subsequently, following these comics as a context. So we are exploring how to get this done. Now I'm applying for another research grant to explore how this can be done for some students who are willing to extend beyond just the usual comics. Okay? Yes, so this is not the first question. But the reality is that to get people to draw these comics is really not easy. I have actually spent a lot of time to get different people. Eventually, I'm happy with one person who can do the designing and the programming at the same time. It's difficult. Expensive, yes, expensive, very expensive. Yeah, you know that in Singapore everything is expensive. This is one of the very expensive things as well. Okay, so I was not able to do too much things from that. So only 5 chapters. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to mention is, what am I using to analyze the classroom episode? Currently, I'm using the TRU framework, Alan Schoenfeld's Teaching for Robust Understanding, TRU. If you Google this, you can find it. Yeah. In fact, we have done one analysis of a complete set of lessons, and we found that the comics lesson actually meet many of the criteria of this TRU framework. TRU framework is a mathematically powerful classroom, okay, proposed by this Professor Alan Schoenfeld from UC Berkeley. His framework is available, easily available, and we analyzed the classroom episode according to that, and we find that in fact it meets many of the criteria there. Okay, so we will be publishing a paper soon. Now we have analyzed the data for one teacher, for the complete set of lessons of one teacher. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Lam, for your presentation. I'm Wahyu from Lombok. I would like to ask in terms of theoretical and empirical basis. I mean, in the light of theory of communication, I wonder how the transition from comic content to the mathematical ideas. I mean, is there any explanation in that theory that on how we can proceed the transition from students when reading the comic content to the mathematical ideas? And on how, in the light of your empirical experience in that research, can enlighten the transition process? I mean, in your experience in that research, on how the transition from comic content to the mathematical ideas. Thank you.
You see, currently,
Actually, may continue the question because my question is related to his question, because in your research, you base your research on the communication theory, right?
I use that as a guide. I use that as a guiding principle for the
yes, and in mathematics teaching and learning, the base idea, the main idea is to help students to construct their own knowledge on mathematics. So if you use the communication theory, I'm thinking about the transfer of knowledge. So from sender to receivers. This is a process of communication, sender to receivers. And it is okay if the knowledge that we want to send is, how you call it? Kalau yang kita sampaikan itu apa Pak Jo? Kalau di luar realistic mathematics education itu kan kita lebih ke construction ya, construction knowledge kan. It is okay if just information that we want to deliver to our student. But in mathematics, the main idea is to how we help students to construct their own ideas, concept in mathematics. So I'm wondering how you transform from your mathematical ideas using comic and then student constructs.
Yes. Thank you. Actually, in our design, we did actually think of this. It's just unfortunate I don't have the full package over here. If I full package, I will show you some of these things. Okay, you see, one thing is that we are very clear-minded that the thing that we want to do is we want to engage students in learning mathematics. So if you look at the communication theory, it is the message, it's the mathematics that we want to communicate. It's not the comics. The comics is actually the medium. You see, just like, okay, I use example, McDonald's. Okay, they have all those icons, all the clowns and all these things, right? Those are not the things that they want to communicate. They want to communicate the product, agree? Yeah, the thing that they want to sell is they want to communicate. So all these additional things like comics, etc. This is actually the medium. Okay, the medium of that conveys the message across. So I think we have to make this very clear. Okay, and of course in this medium, which is the comics, we try to minimize the so-called noise, so that we don't have too many distractions. Even though it is very funny, it is very silly, it is very ridiculous, but it conveys the main idea across. It conveys this main idea across. Okay? So this is one thing that in our design process we are very mindful. If this section I'm going to talk about percentage increase, all my ideas, all the crazy ideas that I discussed in this section must bring across towards that. I can include humor and all this. It must be able to facilitate this development. Okay, so this is one thing when we use communication theory, minimize the noise part. And the second thing is, yes, communication theory, I think this is a valid point. Communication theory means I want to transfer information to you. But in education, you want students to construct their knowledge. You see, so how do we reconcile this? Actually, our experience of this research actually shows this. Once students, they get excited, for example, over here, okay, once they get excited, they are able to create a lot of new things on their own. I give you one example that is very interesting. Under statistics, I did not show you in this presentation. Under statistics, there's one chapter which talks about presentation of data using a pictogram. You have a picture to represent the frequency. Okay? And what was interesting is that my comics itself was very generic. But the students start to discuss among themselves what icons are suitable. And some of them brought up, oh, the icons must be symmetrical, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And also, in the comics, I only talk about very generic things, but the students bring out the data must be ordinal in nature before you can represent on a line graph. Of course, they don't use such a sophisticated name. You can see in their conversation, all these things start to appear. So, in a way, as they get engaged into it, they start to discover more things and they create more things into it. So that's why I am not surprised when some teachers say, why not let the students create their own comics? But to me, even if we let students create their own comics, we want them to create their own mathematics. It's not comics. Comics is a medium to learn mathematics. Yes. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, someone in the back. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Retno Mulyani from this university, but I'm not from the mathematics department. I'm a language teacher. The first point, maybe I can connect it or relate it to the discussion with the previous questioner. In field of communication, as far as I know, there will be a sender, so there will be a message, and then a sender, a receiver, noise, and there are still two other elements. They are redundancy and repetition.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
if I do not misunderstand the discussion with the previous questioner, then we should also consider the other two
Yes.
R's here, repetition and redundancy.
Yes.
And as for me, myself, I'm interested to learn more about how you already accommodated or how you already provided repetition elements in your design. So repetition, yeah. Redundancy, I'm sure you have made a lot of efforts to reduce or to minimize it. Yes, that's my first comment or question.
Redundancy.
Redundancy and repetition. So probably within the 5 units of lesson, you already provided a lot of repetitions that can help your students or your participants build or construct the mathematics knowledge.
Yes.
I don't know much, Professor.
Yes.
The second is a very simple question. Your example of building the sense of estimation is very interesting. And so I have a question, very simple. How to help parents, especially those who still have sons and daughters who are still learning at elementary schools, to develop sense of estimation, which hopefully will lead to literacy in mathematics. So how to help parents develop their literacy in mathematics so that they can function as parents to help their sons or daughters learning mathematics and enjoy learning mathematics. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question seems is a tough question, which we are still finding way in Singapore. Okay, the first question you see. First of all, reducing this redundancy and repetition. Yes, actually, I'm not sure. I think some authors actually classify them as noise or separate, which I'm not sure. Yes, you see, when we design this package itself, we are not just in our mind. Actually, for example, I designed 5 sets of comics. I have actually 5 mathematics ideas behind. Lesson 1 corresponds to a certain idea. Lesson 2 corresponds to this. So in terms of repetition itself and redundancy, I don't think there is too much of that. But at some point in time, we purposely include certain repetition when it comes to education, when we want to reinforce a certain idea. For example, just now you saw the very silly joke, 50% discount for haircut, only half. In fact, I have a repetition of that after that. Another pizza, go to a pizza shop, 30% discount. No, he paid 30% of the price. But he only get 2/5 of the pizza. You see, but I use this repetition to as a reinforcement of this, and I use this to link to the importance of being able to convert percentage to fractions. So at some point in time, certain part of this repetition is included. Yes, redundancy, as in I would not want to include those parts of the comics which do not lead to the development of anything, or even contrary to what I want to develop. Yes, so I think when we develop the comics, we are mindful of this. Every part we are leading towards the goal. So we are being led by the idea of this to reduce the so-called noise. So in this process, so we are mindful in the process of development over there. Every jokes that we included at appropriate juncture is to lead towards a certain concept to be developed in the lesson. Yes, of course we are not in the best position to talk about communication theory, but I thought that with a little help from there, we may be able to see from a different perspective about this teaching of mathematics. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The last 2 questions, could you please address the questions, but probably we don't have time to respond, but we would like to learn from you about your own questions. Would you please address the last two persons? Just address the question, but we don't have time to respond. Please do.
Okay, thank you. My name is Andre from Mas Raswati University Denpasar, Bali. And maybe I will direct directly to my question. Nowadays we using learning video too, which is you can add fun, humor and laughter also in learning video. And my question is, what is the superiority of comics rather than the learning video? Thank you.
Thank you. Last question.
Good morning, Professor. My name is Susasmita Siparni. I'm from Scientific Mathematics, Yogyakarta. I just have a question for you about, I was interested in making it more interactive as one of the refinement that is proposed to your comic books. So I want to ask, did you use, or if you haven't yet, are you going to be interested in using different type of questions throughout your comics books as a way to develop a certain type of thinking or making it more interactive for your students? I mean, aside from practice questions, of course. So, and if you're interested to use it in the future, I know the background behind it and such. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions. I do hope that you can continue discussing the responses outside of this seminar room. But this is it. This is the end of the first keynote speaker. We would like to again emphasize that comics can be really a good medium for instruction. But again, this is not the message. The message itself is the subject matter, the topics, for example, like mathematics. So I do agree with you, Professor. And we also can think of the OBE, which is actually now becoming very hot and burning issue in our curriculum, outcome-based education. Probably we can think of how we can provide or use comics in terms of OBE. Maybe one day we can also do or conduct research on this. Thank you very much, and I will return to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you, Professor Toh Tin Lam and Bapak Paulus Kuswandono.
To Bapak Rohandi, PhD, we would like to invite you to come on stage to give a token of appreciation to Professor Toh Tin Lam and Bapak Paulus Kuswandono, PhD. Thank you, Bapak Rohandi, Professor Toh Tin Lam, and Bapak Paulus Kuswandono. You may be seated.